folks? Guerrilla Radio episode 10, back with Susie. So we're going to talk about something that it's just, I think over the last couple of years, a lot of people in fitness and health have been talking about it, but I think it's starting to become a little more mainstream, I'd say, in the last couple of years. It's what we're hearing now is being called the second brain, and that is in reference to the gut microbiome and gut health. So today we're going to tackle the importance of gut health, good bacteria versus bad bacteria, all that kind of stuff. So we'll kick it off to Susie, starting off with this whole idea of like what is gut microbiome and why is this even an important conversation?
Right. I'd say, honestly, the people that come into the office, or that I have come to the office, I'm sure if you had them fill out like a symptom thing, most people would probably be marking off intestinal issues, irritable bowel, some type of stomach issue. And almost everyone just thinks that's normal. They're like, I've been this way for as long as I can remember. And it's not normal. And a lot of times until we strip everything clean and rebuild that good health, that good gut bacteria, then you start to notice sensitivities to food a lot of times and those kind of things. So, honestly, there's so many things that are going to stem from having an unhealthy gut. When it comes to, just like you had mentioned with like mental status, you know, like your mental health, so kind of in general, your body's ability to do other things other than digest food.
Yeah. Right. So, and it kind of builds off this basic idea that we have good bacteria in our guts. It needs to be there to help break down food. It's huge for our immune function.
Right.
And eating processed, crappy foods kills off that bacteria.
Just destroys it.
Taking antibiotics obviously kills off a lot of that bacteria as well. So, so basically, we're setting the stage for our gut needs to have full of good bacteria. And we talk a little about the types, like this lactobacillus bifido, but I'm not really gonna. I think that's above and beyond the scope of this, because there's tons of different strains of bacteria and that kind of stuff. So, but just know our body's meant to have good, healthy bacteria in our gut, and when we don't, when that balance becomes off, we start creating issues. So, talk to me about some of these.
Well, with leaky gut, a lot of times we see this even starting in children. I mean, it's not something that like necessarily has to happen over time. A lot of times it can be from during a pregnancy or whatever the case may be, or if a kid is sick and like you mentioned, antibiotics, when they're done or when they're on multiple rounds of antibiotics, that's just destroying all that good bacteria. And then we can't get enough of it in our daily diet. So then when we're not supplementing and we're not doing all these other things to counteract it, we end up having issues with, I mean, it just tears up the lining of the gut. And then you have issues like leaky gut, bloating,
and it's gross because ultimately the bile can end up in the bloodstream.
Yes.
So it's
toxic. It's just, that's not how your body is supposed to function. The rest of your body is not supposed to process those things. Right. Your gut is. And so then when you've got issues with that, it's going to end up your immune system in general is going to just kind of plummet in a sense because you don't have anything good to fight off the bad, and so then you end up having a toxic level in your system and those kind of things. And then, I mean, otherwise it would be things like stress levels too, impacting it and tearing it up. People that are under chronic stress all the times, and we talk about that. We talk about that all the time with other health issues as well. But once again, it links back to this, and so how important managing stress is. Yeah,
and I think a lot of people might make a very obvious connection to some of this stuff, like digestion, leaky gut, and even Crohn's, which obviously is something we talk about a lot. And I think, there's a whole other conversation about gluten sensitivity and Crohn's. I think most people think they're gluten intolerant when they're probably not. It's just a matter of digestion. Processed foods have the problem. Yeah. But what I found most intriguing over the last couple of years of research coming out is the effect in mood on the gut microbiome. And an interesting fact I was just reading earlier about this stuff, and Johns Hopkins posted studies, and they were talking about 90% of serotonin, which is a hormone linked to well-being and happiness, 90% is created in the gut.
It's incredible.
Right? And so if we have an imbalance of good and bad bacteria in our gut, we can affect our serotonin levels, which can ultimately affect our mood. They even had stuff relating to early Parkinson's, which I think is crazy.
Wow.
So it's very interesting to read about how food and gut health affects mood and well-being. And I don't think that's too far of a stretch after you think about it. If you've ever had like Taco Bell, if you ever had a bunch of Taco Bell or something like really bad, like just nasty processed stuff, nobody eats like 6 soft tacos and a bean burrito and feels
good afterwards,
right? You may think you don't have any problem with it, but I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier in setting this new normal. And whenever we start people out on, and I know you guys are very similar, cleaning up the diet, the 3 things you immediately remove are grains, dairy, and legumes. Now, the reason we do that is because that's where we see a ton of issues with, especially a ton of gut issues. So someone might say, or they might say, I've just always had GI distress, that's just normal. Well, it's probably not just normal, right? It's probably a food sensitivity, but you're so accustomed to it, it's just the way you think it is. And we're not going to ever really make any progress until we remove it and set that new normal. You'll have, and we have it all the time. When people come back in, they've had 6 weeks of no dairy. They put dairy back in their diet,
and then they
oh
can't,
my God, I never realized this was the case. Or we get a lot of inflammation in the sinuses. It's very interesting to think about that. So, people had someone recently who is drinking 4 or 5 diet sodas a day. They don't see the value in cutting them out because they just feel like it doesn't have any effect. It's like, well, you've done this for so many years. If this is just normal for you, I guarantee you.
Because you also have to think people with, even when it comes to diet soda, regular soda is not any better because you're having all the sugar content, which is just as unhealthy and inflammatory and processed and everything. But as well as artificial sugars. Artificial sugars, your body's, you're putting in a chemical that's not familiar to your body. So where's it going to go? You know what I mean? And so you have this build up, and then it, a lot of times that's where you see a lot of gut issues too, is all those artificial flavors and sugars. And so that's kind of like the avoiding the toxins and stuff. That's huge for people. So that's like when because you guys do all whole foods on the program. We do all whole foods on the program, and the importance of eating whole real foods versus something that's out of a box or something that's been processed over and over and over before it ends up getting to us, and how important that is for your gut.
Okay, cool. So we know what it is. We have some common issues related to immune function, not getting sick, mental health, serotonin production, digestion, leaky gut, right? So we know how it all affects it. Let's talk about how we keep it healthy and some things that we would implement. So first and foremost, we know, let's do supplements last. Let's start with whole foods, right? Nothing is better than whole foods. And again, you can dig deep into the weeds on this stuff. They have like fermented stuff or kefir that you can do, which is a fermented type of dairy. There's good options there. Whole foods are obviously going to be awesome. I think that there's a big, we always talk about marketing and food, right? So a lot of yogurt commercials are pretending to be how you stay regular by putting some probiotics in the yogurt, but ultimately that stuff is more sugar than it is anything else. So definitely read the labels on some of these probiotic
and
claims.
the amount that's in it is usually not what you need anyways. I mean, you'd have to eat tons of yogurt to be able to supplement with what you need.
And the amount of sugar you'd have to take to make it worth it. So we know avoiding toxins and stress. We talked about that already, right?
Alcohol, caffeine. If you are having gut issues, it has to be just like, how long is the best shape? 6 weeks? And our first chunk of the program is 6 weeks too. You have to do it for an extended period of time to get benefit. You can't just kind of half-ass it. It's just not enough. I mean, it's not enough to rebalance everything and reset everything.
Totally.
So that's super important to avoid those toxins for a long enough period of time.
Yep, absolutely. So, okay, good whole foods, avoiding toxins and stress, and then supplementation. So there's many different ways we could talk about, or not many I should say, but a handful of good supplements that we can talk about with gut health. Today we're talking about a straight up probiotic. Next week we'll dig into fish oils too, and omega-3s and that and all that. So we carry UP4. There's a ton of good stuff. You guys do
Innate Choice,
good stuff too. So when you're vetting the process and going back to yogurt, how much do you need in there to be relevant? So a good rule of thumb is 5 billion CFUs, right? And that's basically the concentration of the good bacteria within the pill that you're taking. So this has 5 billion CFU per pill, right? So I take 2 every morning. I get more than enough. Some people say much higher than that. I found for me, I'm right around that 10 billion a day. Multiple strands. So there's really like 2 main strands, and these are just the pretenses, the lacto and the bifido. One deals with the lower, one deals with the upper GI system. And so it's good to make sure that what you're taking has a mixture of both of them, not just one of them, so you're tag teaming it.
Yes. Yeah, you don't want to just do, I can't remember what one of the most common ones, acidophilus or something like that. There's it's one strand, and then you're looking at it and you may read it and it says, 1 million viable cells per capsule. And when you really think about it, 1 million versus 1 billion is a huge difference.
It's a massive difference.
I mean, you really have to pay attention to those little things so you know you're getting quality, and when it's refrigerated, because your guys is refrigerated as well, right?
Yeah, refrigerated stays longer. Yeah.
So it's basically live bacteria.
Right.
So if you leave it out and it sits in the sun, I mean, it's going to die off.
Yeah.
So.
And there's some really cool testing. It's still new to me, but I'll have, we're going to have a special guest on in about 5 weeks. So she is a functional medicine nurse practitioner, and I signed up to do basically it's a gut microbiome test, where you have to take a stool sample for like 4 weeks, not the pleasant part of it, but then you send it in, it gets tested at a facility, and they come back with a wide range of reports on the health of your gut bacteria. So one of these, in about 5 weeks, we should have that done, and we can dig deep into it and look at some of the results and where we really...
It's incredible to see truly how you can think you're doing all the right things, but it could be something from 10 years ago that we had done that still has like that, not quite, things are not quite in balance. So, yeah.
Cool. So super important stuff. If you just Google it, you can learn 100 times more than we talked about today. But I really think, especially from a depression and anxiety perspective, most people don't ever connect gut health with mental health, and we're finding out more and more that there's a pretty significant correlation and causal relationship. So it's worth
and along
exploring.
with weight loss too, because I mean that's kind of the point of both of the Best Shape and the True Weight Loss program. A lot of people have struggled for so long with weight loss, but once they get their gut in good health, it starts to just fall off easily.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Yep.